I'm Abigail Foster, 35, and my life has always been overshadowed by my family's contempt. At my father's 60th birthday party in Raleigh, I sat quietly in the corner, staring at nothing more than a cold, dry piece of bread. Laughter echoed around me, but my stepmother's cruel words cut through it all. "That's all you deserve," my sister smirked, adding, "always invisible, always pathetic." Their words pierced me like knives. But tonight, I wasn't there to beg for scraps. I had a plan. The room sparkled with lights, glasses clinking, 60 guests, friends, business partners, Raleigh's elite, completely unaware of what was coming. In my pocket, a small USB drive made my heart pound like a war drum. When it was time for speeches, I rose, legs trembling but eyes steady. "Let's watch something real," I said, my voice slicing through the chatter. The screen lit up, and instantly, my stepmother's smile froze. My sister's eyes widened in shock. Whispers died away, replaced by a heavy silence. "Turn it off," my stepmother screamed, her voice shrill. But it was too late. All the guests sat stunned, eyes locked on the screen, and I knew the truth had finally been revealed. If you were in my place, would you dare expose everything in front of family and friends, or stay silent to keep the peace? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your answer might inspire someone facing the same battle. Days before facing my family, I sat in my Raleigh apartment, staring at an email that felt like a trap. As a documentary filmmaker, I spend my days chasing stories of people the world overlooks. Ironic, since that's been my life. My tiny studio, cluttered with camera gear and half-edited scripts, is my sanctuary in a city that worships wealth. My mother passed when I was 5, leaving memories too faint to hold. By 7, my stepmother moved in with her daughter, Shannon, 3 years younger than me. That's when everything changed. Karen, with her cold stare, made it clear I wasn't her priority. Shannon, always trailing her, learned to mimic that disdain, her smirks cutting deeper than words. Growing up, I was the afterthought. Karen dressed Shannon in designer clothes, paid for piano lessons, and cheered at her school plays. Me? I got faded jeans and silence. At 10, I asked to join a family dinner with Dad's business partners. Karen's response was sharp. "You're not part of this." Shannon chimed in. "Stay out of it, Abby." Dad, buried in real estate deals, didn't notice, or didn't care. I shrank, learning to stay quiet, blending into the walls of our sprawling Raleigh house. My escape was a cheap camcorder I bought at 16, filming stories of kids like me, ones nobody saw. Karen called it wasted time. Shannon scoffed, "Your films won't change anything." I left home at 18, piecing together a life through scholarships and late-night editing sessions. Shannon glided through college on family money, landing internships Dad's name secured. Karen threw her a lavish graduation party I wasn't invited to. Dad sent me a check with a scribbled note. "Congrats." That was it. The distance between us grew, but the sting of being less than never faded. I poured it into my work, crafting documentaries that won small awards, but never the spotlight. My friend Ellen Reed, a graphic designer I met in high school, was the only one who saw what I could do. Over coffee at a downtown cafe, she'd say, "Your films matter, Abby. Don't let them dim you." When the email for Dad's birthday arrived, signed by Karen, my first instinct was to delete it. The words were formal, like I was a distant cousin, not family. I pictured walking into that elegant hall, surrounded by Raleigh's elite, only to be ignored again. Why bother? But Ellen sprawled on my couch, grabbed my phone. "You're going," she said, her voice firm. "Not to please them. To prove you're not invisible." I stared at her, chest tight. I'd spent years dodging confrontation, burying the hurt in my work. But Ellen's words hit hard. She was right. I wasn't that kid hiding in her room anymore. I thought back to moments that still burned. Christmas, when Karen gave Shannon a sapphire bracelet while I got a bookstore gift card, or Shannon's Sweet 16 where Karen rented a ballroom, but my graduation passed with a text from Dad. "Proud of you." Every slight built a wall, but it also built me. My films, my grit, they came from that pain. I wasn't going to that party to beg for a seat at their table. I was going to stand tall and face the family that pushed me aside. 2 weeks before the party, Ellen burst into my apartment one evening, eyes wide with urgency. She had been sketching at a downtown Raleigh cafe when she overheard Shannon on her phone, her voice hushed but smug. "It's all set, Kyle," Shannon said, barely audible over the clink of coffee cups. "The shares will be mine soon." Ellen caught the name, Kyle, Shannon's friend who always lurked at family gatherings with that slick grin. She didn't hear much else, but the phrase, "shares will be mine," sent a chill down her spine. When she told me, my heart skipped. Dad's real estate company was his life's work, the cornerstone of our family's wealth. Why was Shannon whispering about it like a thief? I felt a knot in my stomach. Karen had always pushed Shannon forward, grooming her to inherit Dad's legacy while I was left out of every boardroom conversation. Was this their latest scheme to cut me out completely? Or worse, were they plotting against Dad himself? Ellen paced my living room, not mincing words. "Shannon's up to something," she said, tossing her sketch pad onto the couch. "She's not smart enough to cover her tracks." I nodded, mind racing. I had spent years capturing other people's secrets on film. Now it was time to uncover my family's. That night, we began digging. Ellen remembered a shared cloud account from a freelance job she'd done for Shannon's marketing side hustle. Shannon, true to form, hadn't changed the password. We huddled over my laptop, the screen casting shadows as we scrolled through her messages. Most were trivial, dress fittings, lunch plans, but then we found a thread with Kyle Ramsey, Shannon's college buddy. "Make sure the papers are ready," Shannon typed. "Dad won't suspect a thing." Kyle's response was blunt. "Karen's got the lawyer lined up." My breath caught. They were planning to transfer Dad's company shares to Shannon, tricking him into signing them away. Karen was orchestrating it, using her charm to keep Dad clueless. I stared at the screen, anger bubbling. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was betrayal, pure and cold. Dad had poured his soul into that company, building it from a single office into a Raleigh empire. I pictured him in his study, signing deals with quiet pride, unaware his wife and stepdaughter were scheming behind his back. Ellen muttered, leaning over my shoulder, "They're playing dirty." I nodded, jaw tight. "We need proof," I said. "Something they can't deny." We kept searching. One message from Kyle jumped out. "Bring the documents tomorrow." All set for the transfer. Attached was a draft agreement detailing how Dad's majority shares would go to Shannon, Karen's signature already at the bottom. I saved it to a USB drive, hands shaking. This was bigger than I imagined, a calculated move to strip Dad of his legacy. I thought about confronting Karen, but her sharp tongue would twist it against me, and Shannon would just laugh. No, I needed something solid, something public. Ellen had an idea. "Let's catch them talking," she said, voice low. The next afternoon, she trailed Shannon to a bar on Fayetteville Street, blending into the crowd. I stayed home, editing footage, my phone buzzing with her updates. "They're here," she texted, sending a shaky audio clip. Shannon's voice came through clear and cocky. "Once Dad signs, it's ours. He trusts Karen too much." Kyle's laugh crackled in the background. I gripped my phone, fury rising. They thought they could fool Dad, and me along with him. Back at my apartment, Ellen and I pieced it together. Karen would slip the papers into a routine contract, convincing Dad it was business as usual. Shannon would get the shares, and I'd be left with nothing. Not that I wanted the money, but the lies cut deep. Ellen looked at me, eyes fierce. "You've got enough to bury them." I clutched the USB, resolve hardening. The party was my shot to expose them. The night arrived. I walked into the historic Raleigh Hall, wooden columns and chandeliers glowing with old money charm. The air buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, a crowd thriving on status. I dressed simply. A black dress, no frills, knowing I'd never blend in with tailored suits and sparkling gowns. My hand rested in my pocket, fingers brushing the USB drive that held the truth about Karen and Shannon's scheme. It was my anchor, my reason for being there. I scanned the room for Dad, hoping for a glance of warmth, but he was lost in a sea of handshakes, face lit by business talk. A young waiter approached, expression polite but stiff. "This way, ma'am," he said, leading me past the main tables to a small table near the emergency exit. The chair wobbled. The tablecloth was stained. A single plate sat before me, with a dry piece of bread. I stared, chest tightening. This wasn't an oversight. It was deliberate. Karen's touch was everywhere. I caught her eye across the room, lips curling into a faint, satisfied smirk. She glided over in her silk dress, rustling as she leaned in. "That's all you deserve," she said, voice low, dripping with disdain. Shannon, trailing behind in a glittering gown, let out a sharp laugh. "Always invisible," she added, her words slicing through the hum of the party. I gripped the USB tighter, knuckles white. Their words stung, but I'd endured worse growing up. This time, I wasn't the kid who shrank away. I forced a smile, holding Karen's gaze. "Nice setup," I said, tone steady though my heart pounded. She raised an eyebrow, surprised I'd spoken, then turned away, dismissing me with a flick of her wrist. Shannon lingered, smirk widening. "Don't embarrass us tonight," she said before striding back to the main table, basking in the attention of Dad's business partners. I sat alone, the bread untouched, mind racing. The hall's grandeur felt suffocating, polished floors reflecting light from walls lined with portraits of Raleigh's past. Guests glanced my way, some with pity, others with disinterest. A woman in a pearl necklace whispered to her companion, eyes flicking toward my table. I straightened, refusing to slouch. I wasn't here for their approval. The USB in my pocket was proof I had something they didn't. The truth. I thought of the messages, the audio of Shannon and Kyle plotting to steal Dad's company. That knowledge kept me grounded as the room seemed to close in. Dad finally appeared, moving through the crowd with a tired smile. I stood, hoping for a glance of warmth, but Karen intercepted him, hand on his arm, steering him toward a group of investors. He didn't see me, or maybe he chose not to. The familiar ache hit, but I pushed it down. This wasn't about winning his love tonight. It was about stopping a lie. I scanned the room for the projector, setting my plan into motion. The speeches would come soon, and I'd be ready. Waiters circled with trays of champagne, but none stopped at my table. A man in a sharp suit bumped my chair, muttering an apology, without looking at me. I felt the weight of every slight, every moment I'd been pushed aside. But I also felt the USB, solid and real, a weapon I'd wield when the time came. Karen and Shannon thought they could bury me with a piece of bread and a corner table. They were wrong. As the speeches began, the MC's voice echoed through the hall, praising Dad's real estate legacy. The crowd applauded as Karen stepped up, polished smile in place, talking about family and loyalty. I could barely listen. My pulse raced. This was it, my chance to show them all. I caught the eye of the AV tech I'd spoken to earlier, a nervous kid who'd agreed to help after I slipped him $20. I nodded, and he slipped into the control booth. Karen finished to polite claps, and the MC called for more remarks. I stood, legs steady despite the knot in my chest. "I have something to share," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs. Heads turned, some curious, others annoyed. Karen's smile froze. Shannon's eyes narrowed from the main table. I walked to the stage, USB in hand, and handed it to the tech. "Play it," I whispered. He plugged it in, and the screen behind me flickered to life. The video started with a grainy text message blown up for all to see. Shannon's words to Kyle, "Make sure the papers are ready. Dad won't suspect a thing." Gasps rippled through the room. The screen shifted to another message, Karen's name clear. The lawyer set. Then came the audio clip. Shannon's voice, unmistakable. "Once Dad signs, it's ours. He trusts Karen too much." Kyle's laugh followed, cold and smug. "He's got no idea." The crowd went silent, air heavy with shock. I stood still, watching their faces, some wide-eyed, others whispering furiously. Karen's composure cracked. "Turn it off," she snapped, voice sharp. But the tech looked to me uncertain. I shook my head. The video kept rolling, showing the draft agreement with Karen's signature, outlining the plan to transfer Dad's shares to Shannon. The hall erupted in murmurs. Guests turned to each other, faces a mix of disbelief and outrage. I glanced at Dad. His expression shifted from confusion to betrayal. He stood slowly, eyes locked on Karen. Before anyone could move, Carl stumbled in from the back, flushed, clearly caught off guard. "It's true," he blurted, voice shaky. "Shannon and Karen, they planned it all. I just followed orders." The room exploded in chaos. Guests shouted questions, glaring at Shannon, who sat frozen, her charm shattered. Karen stepped toward Dad, hands raised, voice trembling. "Gregory, it's not what it looks like," she said. But he cut her off, face hard. "Explain this," Dad said, voice low but piercing, pointing at the screen. Shannon tried to speak, words stumbling. "Dad, it was just a misunderstanding." Her voice cracked, unconvincing. I stood silent, letting the evidence speak. Guests' whispers grew louder, judgment clear. A woman in a velvet dress leaned to her husband, muttering about disgrace. A man in a tux shook his head, staring at Karen. And I felt a strange calm, the weight of years lifting. I had done what I came to do. Dad turned to me, eyes searching mine. For the first time that night, he saw me, really saw me. "You did this?" he asked, voice soft but heavy. I nodded, throat tight. "I had to," I said. He didn't respond, but his gaze held something new, respect, maybe, or regret. Karen tried again, voice shrill. "She's lying, Gregory. She's always been jealous." But the crowd wasn't listening. The evidence was undeniable, and her mask had slipped. Shannon stood, face pale, trying to slip toward the exit, but guests blocked her path, their stares cold. Kyle, still standing awkwardly, muttered, "I didn't mean for this," then trailed off as all eyes turned toward him. The hall felt smaller, the chandeliers harsher, as the truth settled over everyone. I stepped back, my role done. I'd spent years invisible, but tonight I'd made them see. The MC cleared his throat, attempting to regain control, but the night was broken. The room buzzed with tension. I stood off the stage, heart steady, hands clenched, watching the chaos unfold. A tall man in a tailored suit stood from the main table, face stern. Matthew Stone, senior partner at Stone and Associates. His voice cut through the noise. "Gregory, we've trusted your family for years, but this..." He gestured at the frozen screen displaying Karen's signed agreement. "We're done here. The merger is off." The crowd gasped, heads turning to Dad, whose face had gone pale. Karen lurched forward, voice shrill. "This is a mistake," she cried, hands trembling. "Those documents were just drafts. Nothing was finalized." Her words sounded desperate, clinging to a crumbling facade. Shannon jumped in, flushed. "It's all a misunderstanding," she said, forcing a smile. Abigail twisted everything. But her voice wavered, and the guests weren't buying it. A woman in a sapphire dress turned away, whispering to her companion. A man in a bow tie shook his head, expression cold. The mood of the room had shifted. No one trusted them anymore. I watched in silence as the weight of their lies crushed them. Matthew didn't respond. He nodded to his team, who gathered their coats and exited, footsteps echoing in the now quiet hall. Other guests followed, muttering about broken trust or casting sharp glances at Karen and Shannon. A couple at the bar stood abruptly, leaving half-finished drinks. The party, once alive with laughter, felt like a funeral. I caught snippets of conversation. Disgrace, how could they? As Raleigh's elite abandoned the family they had once courted. Dad stood motionless, shoulders slumped. I'd never seen him like this, stripped of his usual confidence. He looked at Karen, then Shannon, eyes heavy with disappointment. "You did this behind my back," he said, voice low, almost breaking. Karen reached for his arm, face pleading. "Gregory, please let me explain," she said. He pulled away, shaking his head. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the double doors, silhouette fading into the dim hallway. The sight hit me harder than I expected. Not triumph, but a quiet ache for the father I'd always wanted closer. Shannon spun toward me, eyes blazing. "You ruined everything," she hissed, voice sharp enough to draw stares. I met her gaze, unflinching. "You did that yourself," I said, tone calm but firm. She froze, mouth open, no words coming. Karen, still near the stage, looked small for the first time, her elegance undone. "You'll regret this," she muttered, but her threat carried no weight. The remaining guests ignored her, whispering among themselves. I felt no need to respond. Their world was collapsing, and I had only held up a mirror. Standing there, something shifted inside me. The years of being pushed aside, of being unseen, didn't vanish, but they loosened their grip. I wasn't the kid hiding in her room anymore, or the woman relegated to a corner table. I'd stood up, shown the truth, and the room had seen me. A woman in a red gown approached, expression soft. "That took courage," she said quietly before walking away. An older man with glasses nodded, face unreadable but not unkind. Their small gestures grounded me. The hall emptied quickly, the clink of glasses replaced by hushed voices. Karen and Shannon stood alone near the stage, faces drawn, no longer the untouchable duo they'd been. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth had done its work. I thought of my films, the stories I'd told for others, and realized this was mine. I'd spent years documenting pain and resilience, and tonight, I had lived it. Months later, the dust settled, and I faced a new reality. The family company crumbled faster than I expected. Without Matthew Stone's merger, other partners pulled out, spooked by the scandal. By spring, Dad's real estate empire, once a Raleigh cornerstone, was bankrupt. I read about it in the local paper. Stark Foster Properties collapses amid betrayal. I felt pain for Dad, who had poured his life into those buildings, but I didn't regret my choice. The truth had been necessary, even if it tore everything down. Karen's fall was just as swift. Raleigh's high society, once her playground, had turned its back. I heard she showed up at a charity gala, her usual elegance intact. But the women she'd once dined with, ladies in pearls and tailored dresses, gave her cold shoulders. Whispers followed her. She had betrayed Gregory. Invitations dried up, and her name vanished from the social pages. I saw her once, crossing Hillsborough Street, face drawn, clutching a coffee cup like it was her only anchor. I didn't stop. There was nothing left to say. Shannon's charm couldn't save her either. Her marketing gigs, built on a polished image, evaporated. A major regional bank campaign dropped her after the news spread. Her face was no longer welcome on billboards. I overheard a former client at a downtown cafe muttering that Shannon thought she could play everyone. She tried to pivot, posting desperate updates on social media, but the responses were brutal, mockery, and silence. She'd always thrived on attention, and now it was gone, replaced by a void she couldn't fill. Dad retreated entirely. He moved to a small condo outside Raleigh, cutting contact with Karen and Shannon. I called once, leaving a voicemail, but he didn't respond. A mutual friend told me he spent his days fishing, a quiet escape from the wreckage. I wanted to reach out, to rebuild something, but his silence spoke louder than words. He had trusted Karen, believed in Shannon, and their betrayal had broken him. I carried that weight, knowing my actions had forced him to see it, but I couldn't undo the past. For me, life took a different turn. A week after the party, I got a call from Susan Clark, a producer I'd met years ago at a local film festival. She'd been at the gala, one of the few who had nodded at me with respect. "Your courage stuck with me," she said warmly over the phone. "I've got a project, a documentary on family legacies. You in?" I met her at a small studio off Glenwood Avenue, where we pored over contracts and storyboards. Susan's confidence in me felt new, untangled from family drama. I signed the deal, pen steady, a spark of pride igniting. It was my first real break, a chance to tell stories that mattered. The work consumed me. Mornings editing footage, afternoons scouting locations, my apartment a maze of scripts and coffee mugs. Susan pushed me to dig deeper, to capture raw truths, the kind I'd always chased. I thought back to my old camcorder days, filming shadows to feel seen. But this was different. I was building something of my own, not proving myself to anyone. The crew respected me. Their nods and quick smiles were quiet validation. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. Raleigh felt smaller now, its old wounds fading. I walked past the shuttered Foster Properties office one evening, its sign rusted, windows dark. I didn't linger. The past was done, and I was moving forward. Susan's project gained buzz, screenings planned across the state. I poured myself into it, framing shots that told stories of loss and resilience, echoes of my own journey. My name, my work, was starting to carry weight. I thought of Dad sometimes, wondering if he'd ever call. I hoped he'd find peace, maybe even pride in what I'd become. Karen and Shannon were shadows now, their lives unraveling while mine took shape. I didn't wish them harm. Their absence felt like freedom. The city, once a cage of expectations, was now a canvas for my stories. One night, I sat at my desk, the script open, feeling a quiet strength. This was my future, and I was ready to write it. A year later, I stood on my own stage, ready to share my work. The theater on Har Street was packed, the air humming with anticipation. My documentary, a tapestry of family legacies, woven with raw honesty, was about to premiere. I stood at the podium, hands steady, looking out at strangers who had come to see my story. The lights dimmed, the screen glowed, each frame a piece of my heart. I watched the audience lean forward, eyes locked on scenes of fractured bonds and quiet triumphs. When the credits rolled, applause erupted, warm, genuine. I felt a swell of pride, not just for the film, but for the path that led me here. After the screening, people lingered, sharing their own stories. A young woman in a denim jacket thanked me, eyes bright. "Your film made me want to speak up," she said. An older man in a tweed cap shook my hand. "You've got something real here." Their words stayed with me, proof my work mattered. Susan had been right. Telling the truth, even when it hurt, could move people. I signed posters in the lobby, my name in bold print, a marker of how far I'd come. Later that week, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Karen's. Her voicemail was hesitant, her voice stripped of its usual edge. "We need to talk," she said. "For old time's sake." I listened, thumb hovering over the call button, but I didn't press it. I deleted the message, heart calm. Karen's world had unraveled, and she wanted something from me. Perhaps forgiveness, or a way back into my life. But I was done carrying her weight. I had spent years living in her shadow, and I refused to step back into it. I turned off my phone and walked away, the decision final. One crisp morning, I drove to the old Raleigh Hall. Its wooden columns now weathered, chandeliers darkened. The building stood empty, a relic of the night everything changed. I parked and stepped out, camera in hand. The air was cool, the street quiet. I framed a shot of myself in front of the hall, my reflection faint in the glass doors. The click of the shutter felt like a full stop, a punctuation mark on my freedom. This place, once a stage for my pain, was now just a backdrop. I wasn't the woman relegated to a corner table anymore. I was someone new, unburdened. I thought about the journey that brought me here. The truth had been my weapon, not to destroy, but to build. Exposing Karen and Shannon's scheme had cost me a family, but it gave me something far greater, myself. I'd learned that silence could trap you, but speaking out, even when your voice shook, could set you free. I wanted others to know that, too. At the screening, I had ended my speech with a simple call. Stand up for your truth. It's worth it. I hoped someone,